Hey guys, welcome to the Gods Unchained beta with the TheProfesserf. Alright, in this video we are going to talk about all the core legendaries. I'm going to give you my ranking for each core legendary and let you know a little bit about each card. So a core legendary is basically the legendaries in the core set that everyone will eventually have access to. As you level up in the game and when you reach multiples of level 25, 50, 75, etc., your free core pack that you get awarded gets upgraded to a legendary pack. So over time, with luck on your side, you'll be able to pull all these legendaries yourselves. So for all the new players that's pulling all these legendaries, you might be wondering which ones are good and which ones are not. So let me go ahead and share my ranking with you. So here's a list of all the core legendaries, and we're going to go through it one by one. Also, I'm going to use a scale of 1, 2, or 3. 1 or 1 star means that the card is niche and has limited use. 2 means the card is decent and is playable, but not necessarily a staple in every deck. And a 3 or 3 stars means that legendary is strong and would be a great addition to your deck. So let's go ahead and go through each card one by one. First up, we have Deuteria. Deuteria is a 1 mana neutral card with a roar effect that adds a 1 mana 3/3 into the deck. This 1 mana 3/3 then has another roar effect that adds a 5/5 to your deck, and then the 5/5 then adds a 7/7, and you get the final version for 1 mana. So there's definitely a lot of value in this card, and you might get the idea that this is a good card in a control deck, as you're getting plenty of value from one card. I'm going to go ahead and give this card a 2-star, meaning it's decent. So if you're trying to build a control deck and you don't have this card, don't worry, it does not have to be there. But if you have it, definitely put it in and it'll complement your deck. So 2 stars for Deuteria. Next card is a 2 mana neutral, Balthazar, Blood Magus. So this card is a 3/2 for 2 mana and has an effect where at the start of the turn, so not the turn you play it, but the next turn, it does 1 damage to your god and then reduces your god power by 1. So the effect is really nice. The problem with this card is the stat line. For 2 mana 3/2, the 2 health means that it gets taken care of easily by a lot of 1 mana creatures. So because of the 2 health, this card doesn't see as much play as it should if it was a 2/3. So it does have an interesting ability, but because of the stat line, this one is a 1 star, meaning it's niche or weak. You could go ahead and put this into your deck, and you might get value once in a while, but don't expect it to really increase the power level of your deck. Alright, next card is a 3 mana magic legendary. This one is Corrales, the Rune Moth. This one has backline, so it hides behind your other creatures, and it has the ability where at the end of your turn, so the turn that you play it, you are giving a random rune to your hand. And here's the different runes that you can get. You get a Rune of Fire, which does 3 damage to an enemy character, and a Rune of Life, which heals 3 to any one creature that you have and to your god. A Rune of Strength, which gives +2/+2 and frontline to one of your friendly creatures. Or a Rune of Sight, which lets you foresee 2 and also draw a card. So Corrales has a pretty good effect. It does have bad stats of 1/1, but really you're not playing it for the stats, you're playing it for the rune effect. Because you're playing this card for the rune effect, it serves a specific purpose, meaning it doesn't go in every deck, and you really have to synergize with the runes. Because of that, we're going to give Corrales 2 stars, which means it's decent. This card has its place in the right deck, but doesn't need to be in every single deck. Alright, our next legendary is a 3 mana nature legendary, Gersemi Freja Spear. This one has a stat line of 4 attack, 2 health, with a roar and afterlife effect of give region +1 to each other friendly creature. So the problem with this card is the 2 health for 3 mana. It doesn't last too long on the board, but you definitely get the value from the roar effect and the afterlife. So in a way, you don't mind that the card doesn't last that long on the board because you really want that afterlife effect of giving regen +1 to each other creature. However, as a standalone card, this card is not too strong, and you really need to have a board of other creatures to benefit from the roar and afterlife effect. And if your opponent has control of the board or has answers for your board, they are able to control who gets the afterlife effect. So there's definitely some downside to this card in that you can't manipulate the benefits that you get from this card easily. Your opponent has a say in who gets the benefits. So because of that, I'm giving this legendary 1 star, meaning it's weak or niche. So it does have a place in regen decks, but again, I think there are other plays and other cards that suit a regen deck better. Next, we have Mana Garma. Mana Garma is a 3 mana nature legendary. This one has a stat line of 4 attack with 3 health. It's confused, and whenever this creature attacks, you refresh 3 mana gems. So Mana Garma allows you to be able to use 3 extra mana gems, meaning if you have 5 mana gems and you go ahead and play some cards and get down to 1 or 0 mana, you could then attack with this creature and get back 3 mana to do additional plays for that turn. So the effect is fairly powerful in the right decks. The Confused is pretty much a given since it's a nature card. The stat line could be better if this was a 3-4. This would definitely be a powerful card, but at 4-3, it's kind of borderline strong, borderline okay. So we like the effect of Mana Garma. However, because of the stat line, that holds it back a little bit, so we're going to give it 2 stars, meaning it's decent. So this card is decent, meaning it does not need to be in every nature deck, but in the right deck, it could definitely provide some value. Alright, our next legendary is a 3 mana death legendary. This one is Sonatris, the spell Locus. This one's effect is it has deadly and an afterlife effect where at the start of your next turn, choose and obliterate a card in your hand, then summon this creature from the void. It has a stat line of 1 attack and 3 health. So if this creature has been summoned and your opponent deals with it and he goes to your void, the very next turn you draw a card, then you then have to destroy one of the cards in your hand to summon this creature back onto the board. So that's quite a tremendous downside for something that gets infinite deadly. While the deadly is nice, the 3 health makes it easy to deal with. So because of the 3 health, I would say that this card is fairly niche. I'm going to give it 1 star, meaning that it has to be in a very specific deck to work. And if you really want deadly, you could use other creatures. And getting the resummon back and losing a card is too steep of a price to pay. Our next legendary is a 3 mana neutral, the Nemean Lion. This one comes with front line, and it gains +1/+1 whenever a creature with roar enters the board. So it could be your creature or your enemy's creature with roar. It will automatically gain +1/+1 before the roar effect goes off. It comes with a stat line of 2 attack and 2 health. So once this creature is played, it's 2/2, and if your opponent uses an archer to try to ping away the 2 health, the archer enters the board and it has a roar effect. So this immediately becomes a 3/3, and the 2 damage from the archer is not enough to take it out. However, because of the 2 health, it can easily be handled before it gains +1/+1 from its ability. I'm going to give this card 1 star, meaning it's weak or niche. So you pretty much have to make a roar deck to take full advantage of the Nemean Lion. But if you play this by itself, without any roar card support on the same turn as played, the chances of it surviving is very slim. The next card is a 3 mana light legendary. This one is the Triumvirate Profit. It has a stat line of 1 attack and 2 health. It has a roar ability. Give the chosen one +1/+1, frontline, and ward. Then move the chosen one to the top of your deck. So right away, this card is very specific. It only works with the chosen one. So this card has limited availability. It's not going in every single light deck. The stat line's really bad. It's a 1/2. You're really using this card only to buff up the chosen one, which you won't get till the next turn because you won't draw the top card till your next turn. So because of all those downsides, I'm going to give this card 1 star. It's a weak card and it's niche, and even plenty of chosen one decks can function fairly well without this Triumvirate Profit. So if you have this card and you want to play chosen one, definitely add it in. But if you don't have this card and you want to play chosen one, you can still play chosen one without this. The next card is a 4 mana neutral legendary and Plurial Sentient Shard. This one comes with Ward. It has an afterlife effect of adding an Plurial Shard beneath the second card of your deck. It has a stat line of 4 attack with 2 health. So anytime this creature gets destroyed and goes to the void, another card, an Plurial Sentient Shard, gets added to your deck right under the second card. So you won't draw it the next turn, you won't draw it the turn after that, but on the third turn you'll draw this card again. The afterlife on this card allows you to have basically an infinite deck. However, the stat line is not too impressive with only 2 health. So I like the ability and the ward effect, but then the stat line's not too impressive, and you really need to put this in a specific type of deck where you're going for a mill win condition, trying to run your opponents out of cards. You would think that those kind of decks are control type decks. A lot of control type decks don't really put this card in. They put other cards that generate additional cards like Jason or Deuteria instead. So this card gets 1 star. Next card is a 5 mana neutral legendary Zaxium Cryptic Panther. This has a roar effect. If any creatures in your hand have deadly, flank, frontline, hidden, protected, twin strike, or ward, this creature gains all those abilities. It has a stat line of 4 attack and 4 health. So this card is interesting in that if you have other cards in your hand with different effects, it picks it up when you play it. But that's also the downside, is those cards need to be in your hand. So if you had a creature with protected in your hand and you play it the turn before, then you play this card, that means Zaxium doesn't get protected. But in the right deck with the proper support, it has great potential and upside. I'm going to go ahead and give this card 2 stars. It's not an auto include in every single deck. And if you don't have this, don't worry about it. But in the right deck, where you notice that you have a lot of creatures with a lot of effects, and you tend to have a good amount of creatures in your hand, then this card is worth adding to that deck. The next card is a 6 mana light legendary, Asterius Glittering One. This card comes with Frontline, has a roar effect. Friendly creatures with strength of 2 or less gets +2/+2. It comes with a stat line of 4 attack and 6 health. So right away, this card has decent stats for 6 mana. It has Frontline, and it has a great roar effect where it buffs your other creatures to +2/+2. This card is currently the cornerstone for one of the top decks, a light zoo deck. It provides a lot of value because usually you'll have a board full of small creatures that Asterius immediately buffs. So this card right now is a must-have in that deck. Because of that, this card gets 3 stars. It's a strong card. So this card has an immediate impact to that deck. So this one is definitely worth the 3-star rating. The next legendary is a 6 mana Deception legendary, Thalia Chairite Temptress. It has a roar effect of pull any cards in your opponent's hand that cost 2 or less and put them in the bottom of their deck. So a little bit of hand destruction there. It comes with a stat line of 4 attack and 3 health. So right now, this card doesn't see any play. Even in controlled deception decks that focuses on hand disruption, this card is not included. Right now, the roar effect is conditional, meaning it only removes cards from your opponent's hands that cost 2 or less. Because of the condition, if you play this card and your opponent doesn't have cards that cost 2 or less in their hand, then nothing happens. And at 6 mana, a 4/3 stat line is not very impressive. So we're going to give this card 1 star. It's weak, and I wouldn't even say it's niche, because right now in hand control, hand crush, deception decks, this card isn't even included. The next card is a 7 mana death legendary, Cerberus Styx Hound. It has an ability where at the end of each turn meaning your turn and your opponent's turn, it destroys 3 other random creatures with health of 3 or less. It has a stat line of 5 and 6, which is okay. So the ability is very interesting in that it serves as a board clear for little creatures. However, the downside to that is that it could destroy your own creatures, and if there are no other creatures on the board, you just paid 7 mana for a 5/6. You have to be careful of when to play this. You don't want it destroying your own creatures. So we're going to give this legendary 1 star, meaning it's weak. Our next legendary is a 7 mana war legendary, Hector, Prince of Troy. This one has a roar effect. If any creature in your void have Blitz, Flank, Frontline, Leech, Protected, Twin Strike, or Ward, this creature gains all those abilities. It has a stat line of 6 attack and 6 health. So this legendary has conditions that need to be met. You need to have played other creatures ahead of it that has all these different effects. And then it gains those abilities for all those creatures in your void. So it works out well because this one's 7 mana, meaning you don't play it till later in the game, and you have plenty of time in the early game to play creatures that have the different abilities. The stat line of 6/6 is pretty good. It's not bad. This is not an auto include in every single war deck. It needs to be in a deck that meets certain conditions, such as having various creatures that have the abilities that you want it to gain. So you have to build a deck that specifically has these effects. Because this card is not an auto include in every single war deck, but it does have a fairly good ability, I'm going to give it 2 stars, meaning it's decent. If you don't have this card and you want to play a control or mid-range war deck, you could still go ahead and do that. But if you have this card, you could definitely play around and adjust your deck to have different abilities. So that way when you play this card, he picks those up. So it's a good inclusion in decks where you've built conditions around it for it to benefit, but it's not a must-have in every single war deck. Next, we have a 7 mana Deception legendary, Lokian Disciple. This legendary has hidden and flank, and an ability where whenever this creature attacks the god, a random enemy creature is put to sleep. It has great stats of 6 attack and 8 health. So this card is great in that it stays hidden for the turn that it's summoned, and it has flank, giving it the ability to be able to go directly and attack the god as long as you trigger the flank by attacking first with another creature or your own relic. However, for 7 mana, we want an ability that's a little bit more impactful. Maybe if it sent the creature back to the opponent's hand. But really, the ability of putting a random enemy creature to sleep is nice, but it's not too impactful. So because of that, I'm going to say this card is 1 star. It's weak or niche. It has a niche use when you're going for a hidden type deck and you want to be able to attack directly. However, at 7 mana, that's fairly late into the game. Our next legendary is a 7 mana neutral, Porphyrian Dread Cyclops. This one comes with Ward. It has an ability where at the end of your turn, it increases the mana cost of your opponent's god power by 2. It has a stat line of 7 attack and 8 health. So these are really great stats. 7/8 is a great stat line for a legendary with an ability and ward. The increased cost of your opponent's god power can be disruptive, and the ward makes it hard to get rid of. I'm going to give this legendary 2 stars, meaning it's decent. So you absolutely do not need to include it in every single deck. However, if you have this card and you have a slot open in the 7 mana, this card can be worth considering putting in since it has good stat line, it has ward, and it has an ability that can disrupt your opponent. I would even go on to say that this might be a 2.5, close to a 3. Our next legendary is a 8 mana magic legendary, Fray, Archmage of Celine. This one has a roar effect. For C2, so look at the next 2 cards. You can move them to the bottom of your deck and then draw 2 cards and set those cards to 2 mana. So this is a very strong ability. It has a stat line of 4 attack and 7 health, so a decent amount of health. So this card is an 8 mana draw 2 where you can manipulate the 2 cards that you're going to draw. Not only that, but then the 2 cards that you draw are reduced just down to 2 mana. That's a great deal. I'm going to give this card 3 stars. It's a strong card. So if you're playing any kind of control magic deck and you have this card, you have to include it. The 7 health makes it decent, but the ability makes it amazing. So definitely include this in your control magic decks if you have it. Next, we have an 8 mana war legendary, Grendel, Night Terror. This one comes with Blitz and Twin Strike and has an ability. After this creature attacks another creature, Grendel gains protected. It has a stat line of 6 attack and 6 health. So at 8 mana, which is fairly expensive, you're only getting 6 attack and 6 health. The Blitz and Twin Strike is nice. However, the problem is Grendel doesn't get protected until after it attacks a creature. So if you're playing this at 8 mana, you're probably facing creatures that are pretty strong health or attack. So having only 6 health and no protected until after, it might not survive. So definitely at 8 mana, you want something stronger to be able to take advantage of this ability. So I'm going to give Grendel 1 star, meaning it's weak or niche. For 8 mana, you really want more impact from a legendary. And situationally, Grendel shines if your opponent has a board full of small creatures. But if he doesn't and has big creatures on the board, Grendel doesn't really get any value. Next, we have an 8 mana neutral card legendary. Leydon, Euclid Dragon. This one has a roar effect. Give burn +3 to each enemy creature. If you have at least 6 cards in hand, deal 2 damage to each enemy creature. It has an amazing stat line of 12 attack and 12 health. So this card has great stat lines, and that is a 12/12 for 8 mana. However, being late in the game at 8 mana, you want an effect or ability that has immediate impact. Leydon does have a 2 damage AoE to each enemy creature. However, it's conditional. You need 6 cards in hand. So you're possibly looking at playing 8 mana for a 12/12 that gives burn +3 to each enemy creature, but then still leaves the creatures on the board for your opponent to use on their following turn. So the roar effect is fairly strong, but the condition to trigger the roar effect is a little bit too steep and hard to meet, especially that late in the game. So I'm going to give this card 1 star, meaning it's weak or niche. Playing something at 8 mana, you want the card to be impactful and to do something right away. This card can do that, but it needs to meet a requirement of having 6 cards in hand, and it only does 2 to each creature. And also at 8 mana, this card doesn't have any kind of ward or protection, so it's very weak to spells and removals. Alright, and our last legendary is a 9 mana neutral, Echophon, Atlantean Hydra. This card has Blitz, Protected, Regen 6, Twin Strike, and Overkill. It has a stat line of 6 attack and 10 health. So this card is fairly strong. It used to be stronger. It used to have Ward, but now Ward has been removed and the health has been reduced from 12 down to 10. But in its current state, it's still pretty strong for a 9 mana card. It has immediate impact. It has Blitz. And complementing that Blitz, it has Protected, meaning its first attack doesn't hurt Echophon. So you could target your first attack doing 6 damage to a big creature right away, and you're not taking any damage back. And your second attack from the Twin Strike, you want to make sure you leave enough health so that you regen 6 back and it survives. The Overkill is a bonus, so if you're facing a board full of small creatures, Echophon is a form of a board wipe. So this card used to be very amazing, but now it's just a strong card. It's definitely a top legendary for the 9 mana slot. This card is strong enough that if you have this card and you're playing any kind of late game deck, you definitely want to add this card to your deck. Alright, so that's my review of all core legendaries and ranking them. If you have any questions or if you agree or disagree, please feel free to comment. I'm open to hear your thoughts and what you think about my rankings. My rankings is based on my experience and the current meta of how these cards fit in. So I'll definitely be interested in hearing what you guys think.